It's your girl Shantanell Linden, and I'm back with another episode. So I'm here by myself today just because I'm talking about the next part in the family hierarchy, which is the role of the wife and the mother. Last week, we sat down with my husband and he just explained some of the things that the husband and the father have to deal with. You know, I did want to get his input because I did discuss some of the things that we're seeing happening in society today. And it's something that we've been seeing for a while, but I just saw an upkick of it, I want to say, in 2026, especially in April, where it was a lot of men who seemed to have been in a position where they were losing it and they were harming their wives or harming their children. And I wanted to get the male perspective from my husband just to explain some of the turmoil that men have to go through. Because in my personal opinion, I feel as though men don't have an outlet the same way that women do. Or maybe us women are just more in tune with our emotions. And so we'll go and vent to a friend. We'll go talk to other people. And oftentimes men don't have that safe place where they can go and have an outlet as we do. And I believe my husband did touch on that. Like, if there is help available, they may not want to accept that help or reach out for that help. And so if you want to hear more about that, go back to episode 23 and you will hear my husband just give his point of view as a father, as a husband, and as a man, most importantly, and some of the challenges that you face in that role. And so today we are going to the other side of the coin, which is the mother, the wife, the homemaker, the nurturer, the teacher, and you'll hear things from my perspective. Now, I know that some may have their own opinions concerning some of the things that I may say, but again, it's coming from my perspective and just how I have navigated this world. I am just coming from my point of view and my own experiences, and so I hope that it can help some ladies out there. And so, if you've been following us for a little while, you know my husband and I we're married. We have 5 children total, and we are a blended family. And so, before I had my own biological children, when I met my husband at 18, I became a stepmom to my bonus sons, my 2 oldest sons. They're now 20 and 25, and I still can't believe it. But I was a mother to them for 6 years, still a mother to them, but 6 years before I actually had my own child. And so I believe I've discussed before just some of those things that were kind of difficult to navigate because, again, I was at a young age. I met my husband at 18, and I was still figuring out some things within myself. And the things that I did with them, I based it off of what I may not have liked growing up in my interactions with my relatives, my parents or aunts and uncles. The kind of family dynamic that I grew up in it wasn't just my parents. I had aunts and uncles involved. It was at times I would stay with my grandparents. And so, they were a big part of my life. And so it was some things that I did not like growing up where I felt like me and my siblings at times were not treated like the other grandkids, or maybe because we were the oldest grandkids aside of from my oldest male cousin. And so it just seemed like we would always get blamed for stuff and all of these different type of things. And so when I got into a relationship with my husband and I'm navigating new territory as a bonus mother, I just had that lens. And so I'm just trying to give a framework so you guys can understand where I was coming from. And so it would oftentimes, I remember coming in, and at first, of course, you're wanting these children just to like you. You don't want to come in like you are trying to replace their mother. You can never do that. They had their mothers and their mothers was present, but I wanted to be someone that was another adult that they can trust, another person that they could go to for nurture, comfort, for advice, or whatever it was that they needed at that point. And I know that I didn't always do that well. And looking back, I do wish at times that I would have handled things better. But again, I jumped into this thing at 18. And of course, now being 37, I have a lot more life experience, and it's different when you're looking back in hindsight. And so I can see now things where I erred in, even when it came to my husband, because I may have saw certain things, or maybe I didn't necessarily agree because our family dynamic was not a traditional family. His boys at times would talk to me. They felt safe enough to talk to me, and if it was something that they may not have agreed with their dad, I sometimes would intervene with the disciplinary actions that he would take, because I didn't want them to have a negative view of their dad. But what I know now is at some point your children are not going to like you. And this is why you have to be healed, so you're not parenting, like I said in another episode, from your trauma. So you're parenting from a lens of, well, I don't want my kids to be upset with me. And I gave you a little preview of my background. It was things that I didn't like that, my parents or maybe my extended family did. And so I didn't want my kids to have a negative view of me or a negative view of their father. But what I did not realize is, in doing so, when I may have disagreed with whatever method that he chose to discipline or correct his children, that I was stepping on his toes. And then now there was tension between him and I. And now that I'm older and know better, I know now that that was not the way to handle that. But I can recognize the deficits within myself, where it was just me needing to have more understanding of who I was, and not parenting from a place of trauma. And so that goes into the role because of the mother, because we already established that the man is the head of the household. Now, that does not mean the woman does not have a say-so, or that she doesn't have a say-so in how the home is flowing, but it's all in how you handle that. And I liken it to a president and a vice president, or the principal or the assistant principal. So the president has the final say. So that does not mean that the vice president or the assistant principal or the assistant in any form or fashion, or assistant manager, does not have authority. That when the president, assistant manager, or the assistant principal, when the main person like the president or the principal or what have you is not present, that person is in charge. That person is the one that's in place. A lot of times they may be the one that's really making a lot of the decisions, but when it's time to make that indefinite decision, it lies on that president or the principal or the manager to make that decision. Because if it's a good team that had a good leader, then he understands that he or she is as good as their team. And so if you work and you have a good manager, they understand, if they're not egotistical, they understand that their team has some good ideas, and many times they will incorporate those ideas that their team members have, and they welcome that input. And I liken that to a good husband. He's not going to just be shaking his fist like, I'm the man, I make all the decisions, but he's going to appreciate the input from his wife because they're a team, but he has that final stamp of approval. And, because of God's order. And so that's why I bring up kind of the tension where, I would kind of be impending on his territory. But now that I'm older, I understand more of my role. And I, try to and not saying I do it perfectly all the time, ensure that I'm not impinging on his role. And so, as I want to kind of go, of course, about my experience, but even in the Bible, where you see women just functioning and operating in their role well. And I want to first start with Abigail. And so in the Old Testament, we meet, if you are familiar with the word, you have King David before he was a king. And so while he's running from Saul, he is in the wilderness and stuff like that. And he needs some help from a man named Nabal. Now, apparently he was helping Nabal's servants in the wilderness and stuff like that. And when the time of need came for that favor kind of to be returned, he went to Nabal like, hey, I've been looking after your servants, making sure that nobody attacks them and all of that good stuff. And I just want you to give me some help with some food, water, and things like that. And Nabal, the Bible says his name means foolish. And he foolishly basically was like, who is David? Like, who are you? And like, I'm not giving you anything. And so this upsets David. He gets upset. He's just like, okay, basically he said, I'm going to unalive every male in Nabal's house. So one of the servants, knowing what David decreed against Nabal's house, he went and told Abigail. Now, I always look at this story like, okay, he didn't go to Nabal because he understood that his master was foolish. But he went to the wife, Abigail, and he said, hey, David is about to come and slaughter everybody. So he went to her because obviously the servants understood that she was wise. So this woman in her wisdom, she didn't go to her husband either. She went and gathered some provisions, some sheep, some things, and she went out and met David. She was like, hey, I heard what you did for our servants. I'm giving you these gifts. Thank you so much. And this soothed David because he was ready to slaughter everybody. And so when Abigail did this, David was like, okay, this woman, oh my goodness. I think he was impressed with Abigail. And so long story short, Nabal gets drunk or whatever one night. He goes into the afterlife. I'm just say it that way. And so after Abigail mourns and all of that good stuff, she goes on to be David's wife. And so I bring up Abigail because you see in that situation where she, understanding where her husband's weakness, Nabal, and understanding how foolish she could be, she acted fast to ensure that her household was saved, and she acted quickly to ensure that there was no loss of life. And obviously, she had a good relationship and knew what was going on within her household with the servants because they felt comfortable enough to go to her and knew that she was going to get things done. That she wasn't going to go back and tell Nabal like, hey, the servants came and told us this is what David said. What she did was she responded, and as a result of what she did, her and her entire household was saved. And then she went on to, be married to the king. And so that's one woman I wanted to mention, Abigail. And the next woman I want to mention is the Proverbs 31 woman. Now, I watched this video the other day, and this woman did an excellent job breaking down the Proverbs 31, the entire chapter. Normally, when you hear about the Proverbs 31 woman, people start at verse 10 because that's when it begins to describe this virtuous woman. But I love how this individual, she started at verse 1 because in Proverbs 31, it starts off with the king talking about getting advice from his mother. And so that goes back into that teacher role that I was talking about, where it is our job as mothers to teach our children. And so I want to go to it real quick because, like I said, a lot of people are familiar with the Proverbs 31 story, but they're used to seeing it begin at verse 10, where it begins with, who can find a virtuous and capable wife? And so You even hear people create podcasts and things of that nature around this Proverbs 31 woman. But I love how even before that, we're hearing about a mother to this king, Lemuel. And so Proverbs 31, verse 1 says, "The sayings of King Lemuel contain this message, which his mother taught him. O my son, O son of my womb, O son of my vows, do not waste your strength on women, and on those who ruin kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, to guzzle wine. Rulers should not crave alcohol, for if you drink, they may forget the law and not give justice to the oppressed. Alcohol is for the dying, and wine is for those in bitter distress. Let them drink to forget their poverty, and remember their troubles no more. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed. Yes, speak up for the poor and helpless, and see that they get justice." So I'm not going to go into all of this advice because this is meaty in itself, but this is a mother that is teaching her son how to his level of influence and authority, and how he should behave because he's a king. Like, basically what I'm getting from this is, because he is in this position of leadership and authority, there are just some things that are not becoming of a king. Now, someone that isn't a king, they may be able to, just be partying and drinking wine and all of those things. But for a king, because you have decisions to make and you have this whole kingdom in the palm of your hand, there are certain ways in which you shouldn't behave. And then also, she being a woman, she understands that a woman can be a man's weakness. Come on, Eve, she ate the fruit in the garden and she gave it to her husband. Then you have, oh my goodness, the name escapes me. Delilah, there it goes. Delilah with Samson. She kept weighing him down until he cut his. She told the rest of the Philistines what his strength was. So she's warning her husband. She's like, don't waste your strength on women, on those who ruin kings. And she's speaking of a particular kind of woman. It's not all women, but you know that from verse 3 where it said, on those who ruin kings. Don't waste your strength on women, on those who ruin kings. That gives emphasis on the type of woman. She's saying, hey, don't mess with that type of woman. And so in Proverbs 31, before you even get to this virtuous woman, you have a mother who has a son who is a king that taught him these rules and instructions so that when he's in this position of authority, he can function and operate the right way. And so though I'll just go over those two women for time for now, but you see how both of them operated with wisdom. How with Abigail, she acted quickly to save her household. And then you also see Lemuel's mother, how she was teaching and instructing her son so that he could make wise decisions in his position as a king. And so that goes into to myself and my role as a wife. And like I said, it has not been easy. I've had to learn along the way what it truly means to be a wife and what it truly means to be a mother. And I know that even as I'm going down this hierarchy and speaking about this, people don't really subscribe to this today, or they look at it as though it's demeaning in a certain way. But I like to look at it as God is ensuring that everybody has a layer of protection. And so even the man, he has Christ as his head. And then the woman, she has her husband and also Christ. And the children, they have their mother, their father, and Christ. And it's just this layer of protection that's available because of the vulnerability of the individual. I believe. And so I've had to learn that. And I've even had to learn that in my role as a teacher to actually teach. Because sometimes I think as a mom, especially if you're not even if you are a homemaker, but I'll speak for myself, I work outside of the home. And so it's certain things that I just expect my children to know. And then when I really sit back and think about it, did you really teach them? I get frustrated when they haven't did things according to my standard, but have I really sat down with them and showed them how to do a thing? And I just felt like today the Lord was really teaching me in how I was teaching my children. So we went to the store and got a couple of snacks after I got off of work today. And when I got home, I'm seeing wrappers on the floor. They had some popsicles earlier and they didn't throw them away. There's wrappers, there's popsicle sticks. And normally I get so frustrated when I see this because I'm just like, why can't y'all, the house is, cluttered. And if you have kids, it don't take, it don't take much. You can be done just cleaned up, and before you know it, everything is everywhere. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And so I get home and there's a wrapper on the couch and there's a wrapper on the floor. And my daughter, she's 4 going on 5, and she was sitting on the couch, so I know it was her wrappers. And I was like, hey, I said, get that up. I said, go throw that in the trash. I said, pick up those popsicle sticks and go throw them in the trash. And normally when I'm giving these instructions, I'm yelling. I'm just doing it out of a place of frustration. And, because I'm just, exhausted probably from the day of just having to work, because I go to work and then I come home and then it's like I'm working. I have my 2 jobs. I've worked my 9 to 5 and then I'm coming home and I have my family and my duties in the home. And so it's in that moment when I felt like the Lord was ministering to me, like, show her what to do. And so I was just like, hey, you see that wrapper right there, Raya? Pick that up and go throw it away. You see those popsicle sticks on the floor? Get that up. Okay, go throw that away. Okay, don't leave your cup in the middle of the floor. That's going to get somebody, and it's in the walkway. If somebody walks by, they're going to kick the cup over. Put the cup on the table. And as I'm doing this, it's almost as though I'm feeling the Holy Spirit just encouraging me. You got to teach them. You got to show them, because how else will they know? And I know some of us may be listening to this and they may be thinking to themselves, I've done this. I've shown my children and they still don't do X, Y, and Z. But how many times have God instructed us and we didn't listen? Sometimes things don't click. It's been times I've read the scriptures over and over and over again, and all of a sudden it clicks. I remember when I read, and it's in the book of Matthew, it's really in the Gospels, and in the verse, I can't recall right now, but it's a story in the Gospels where it's a military, a Roman soldier. So basically, he came to Jesus and he wanted his servant healed. So Jesus like, okay, cool. I'm going to come to this servant's house or this soldier's house and heal his servant. And so after the servant thought about it, he was like, hey, he said, I'm not worthy for you to come to my house. How about you just send a word, because I'm a man also of authority. And when I tell one to go, they go. And when I tell them to come, they come. And Jesus was so just amazed. And he said, I have not seen this amount of faith in all of Israel. And he sent the word and he said, your servant is healed. And so by the time the messengers that had went to Jesus made it back to the soldier's house, the soldier's servant was healed. And I used to read that and be like, why is Jesus saying that this man had all of this faith? I just could not understand for the life of me why, it just wasn't clicking. It wasn't clicking, y'all. And so it finally, one day I was reading a story and it clicked. I said, oh my goodness, the man understood Jesus' authority. He understood Jesus' authority because he was also in a position of authority. He understood that Jesus didn't have to physically be there for the man to be healed. All he had to do was send the word. All he had to do was speak a word and the servant was healed. It did not require his physical presence. A lot of times it does not require you to physically be there. If you are a person in leadership, if you have a well-built system, you don't have to physically be there hovering over people's shoulders. They know what to do. Hallelujah. And so I had finally got that story and it clicked. And so I say all of that to say, sometimes you may have to give an instruction multiple times before it clicks. Now, I'm not going to go into some kids are just lazy. We have that too. But we do know that we're raising children that are developing. And everybody doesn't develop at the same rate. I have, like I said, 5 children. And so sometimes it's easy to compare, like, oh my goodness, Trey, I didn't have to tell him to clean up. I didn't have to, whatever. I didn't have to stay on him about this. I didn't have to, but the other ones, you may have to. That may not be something that they naturally want to do, or it's not something that naturally clicks for them. And you have to constantly be on them and then set a standard. And so what I also learned today was it's just certain things that I have not been consistent in. And so now I'm getting frustrated with the children when I haven't had a set routine. That's just like a bedtime. You could say a bedtime is at 8:00, but if the kids are going to bed at 11:00 every night, you haven't really set that as a set in stone bedtime for that child. And so now you're getting mad. Well, you're up until 11:00, but they've been doing that for years, and then all of a sudden you want to enforce this rule of a bedtime at 8 when they've been going to bed at 11. It's gonna take time. It's gonna be a learning curve. And so today I had to sit down, and the summer's here, and I was like, okay, let me write down some rules for the summer. These are some things that that I want to see happening in the home. And this is some parameters I want for video games or going outside and to play. And I sit down with them and I'm like, this is what we are going to be doing for the summer. And now it's up to me as their mother to enforce these rules and be consistent with it, because it's not enough just to say this is what we're going to do, and then because I don't feel like being bothered or whatever, all those rules and all of those systems just go out the window. And I was starting to see that a part of my frustration was because I didn't have a good system in place. And so now I'm upset with the kids because they're not following a system. But it's because of me, because I'm operating out of dysfunction, because I don't have things all set up the right way. And I'm not saying this is going to look perfect, but we all thrive better with structure. We all are our best when there's a set of rules and instructions and whatever that looks like for your household, that makes your household be like a well-oiled machine and function and operate the way it needs to. And so I began to see some things within myself that I could do better, where I could be more consistent, that things are in black and white now. So if you're not doing it, then we can talk about punishment, because what I'm learning is you're trying to enforce a punishment for a rule that's not black and white. It's a whole bunch of gray area, and they don't know whether they coming or going. And so now you're trying to punish them. Now you're trying to yell at them, or they're getting in trouble by something, and you haven't made things clear. And you have to make things clear for children, and they need rules. They need structure. Whatever that looks like for your home, in order for things to, and then it's better for you as the individual. I know I would get frustrated because I'm like, it just seems like it's just jumping all the time, even when it comes to recording. Like, I haven't been as consistent, if I be transparent, as I want to with that, because again, I do work a 9 to 5. I have my kids, and I be trying to wait on it to get quiet so that it's not all of this noise in the background and all of this. And the house is always jumping. And so I'm like, okay, no, you need to set a standard for that. There needs to be some quiet time. They need to master how to be quiet, because we live in a time today where it is a bunch of noise all the time. You can play the video game if you allow them to all night long. There is no stopping it. When I was growing up, even the game systems they have now, If you're playing live, you can't pause it. Like the game systems I grew up on, and I didn't play them, I would watch my brother, but you could pause the game. So say I come downstairs and I'm like, hey, I need y'all to do X, Y, and Z. Mom, I'm in the middle of a live or whatever, because the game is live. They can't pause it. And it's to keep our kids just going and going and going and going, but it's up to us at times to slow things down, slow it down and say, oh no, like y'all don't even know how to use your imagination. Y'all don't know how to just sit in solitude and sit and be quiet, because it's always jumping. Like even back in the day, if you're old enough, you remember where the TV at a certain point, things went off. Like it wasn't just an all-night buffet like it is now. And so I would say if you are a millennial like I am, and we just are toggling between those two worlds of what it was like without so much technology, and then when it kind of we were young adults or teenagers when we really started to see the technology boom, we had the best of both worlds. So we're kind of in that in between. But I see the challenges that I have that my dad and mom did not have. They didn't have, I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 17. My children are, the ages that they are, and they have a phone. And I feel it's necessary for the times that we're in. But now that opens up a whole nother thing of where I have to be monitoring what's on the phone and making sure they're not accessing things that they shouldn't access. And so it can be challenging. And then I'm doing it within the confines of a marriage. And so I can just imagine for the mothers, because I want to speak to this as well, that are single mothers, that are doing it by themselves, that are having to fit the bill of everything financially and emotionally and physically and spiritually and emotionally. And you've been seeing, we talked about the men cracking, we've been seeing the women cracking as well. And so I do want to encourage the single mothers that God is near to the brokenhearted. I think about the woman, I liken the single mothers today to the widow. And in the Bible, God always took care of the poor, the widow, and the fatherless. And in a lot of ways, the single mother, I liken them to that, because I truly do feel, and I know quite a few single mothers in my life, and that's why I can speak to this to a certain degree. Now, I'm not saying I'm in their shoes, but I can speak to it from a degree of what I know about their lives. And I can honestly say, man, God takes care of them. It's been times that I've known some single mothers that even with me and my husband, they have been doing better than us together. And I truly know that it's the grace of God. And I'll give my last analogy to compare to that before I close. It's the widow woman. I want to say it's in 2 Kings, whose husband had just died, and he died with debt. And she went to the man of God. She went to Elijah like, hey, my husband is dead. He died leaving this debt. And now the collector who we owe this debt to is coming back, and he wants my children. He wants them he's trying to take my kids, to pay off this debt, to work this debt out. And so the man of God was just like, okay, well, what do you have in your house? What do you have in your hand? And she's just thinking to herself like, nothing. All I got is a jar of oil, and that's it. And so he gives her instructions. He's like, okay, we can work with that. We can work with that. Go to your neighbors. Get as many empty vessels as you can. And she follows those instructions to the letter. So she goes to all her neighbors. She gets all of these empty vessels that her neighbors have given her, and she puts them in her home, closes the door. And now the man of God is like, okay, now fill up every vessel. And all she had was a little bit of oil. But this is where the supernatural comes in. So that oil flowed. As long as she had a vessel to pour it into, that oil flowed. And the minute she no longer had any vessels, that's when the oil stopped. So if she would have had more vessels, it would have continued to flow. And the man of God was like, okay, now that you have these vessels of oil, go sell them. And so once she did that, she was able to not only pay off her debt, but also she had an income. She had something, because during that time, the man was the way society was in that time. It was very difficult for the widow, and had her sons been taken, she really would have been not set up, because even when the husband would die, like the firstborn son normally would take that role of taking care of the mother. And so she would have been really in a bad way. So fortunate for her, she knew she could go to the man of God, and he was able to give her these instructions to help her. And so I give this story to the single mothers to let them know that God takes care of y'all. And when you cry out to him, just know that he responds. Another one, and I promise I'm about to close. Hagar. And if you're not familiar with the story, Hagar was an Egyptian slave. She was the servant of Sarah, Abraham's husband. So, not Abraham's husband. Sarah was Abraham's wife. And Hagar was Sarah's servant. So if you know the story, Abraham and Sarah couldn't have a child. So Sarah's like, hey, I'm going to give you my maid servant, have a child with her. She goes on to do that. Sarah later on is upset about that. Years later, she put Hagar out of her house. And so Hagar, after all of her provisions are gone, all of her water, all of her food is ate up, she's thinking, it's over. I'm in the wilderness. My son is about to die. And she began to weep bitterly. And an angel of the Lord came to her, and he was just like, Hagar, like, your son is going to he's going to be successful. 12 kingdoms is going to come out of him. He's going to be a prince, and he's not going to die. And he reveals this well of water to her. And so, again, another single mother down to her last bit. And at that moment in time, the Lord showed up for her. And so I want these stories to be encouraging for you, that it may be difficult. You may not have a partner in the home to help bear that weight. But if you lean on the Lord, he is there for you. And he will carry that burden with you. And you don't have to do it alone. And so I hope today that this blesses you all, and just a little bit about my background and my story and some of the lessons that I've learned along the way encourages you ladies, and you just continue to function in your role. If nobody has told you, you are doing a beautiful job. No, we are not perfect. We're not going to always get it right, but the Lord is with us. And so I want you guys to have a blessed and wonderful day. Have a good day.